The signal was never meant for Earth. It was designed to travel across the stars, wrapped in layers of encryption and marked with a code that only advanced civilizations of the Galactic Alliance could read. It was a cry for help, a desperate plea sent by voices on the edge of extinction. But the galaxy is vast, and signals do not always travel where they are intended. This one, fragile and full of sorrow, slipped through a strange bend of space. It drifted, carrying fear and hope together, until it brushed against a listening post orbiting the far side of Earth's moon. The post had been built not for war, but for curiosity. Humanity had long been scanning the skies for signs of others, proof that they were not alone. Most days, the listening officers only caught the whispers of pulsars, the hum of distant stars, or the soft static of the universe itself. On that day, however, the monitors lit up. Lieutenant Sarah Klein sat at her console, sipping lukewarm coffee, her eyes half-tired from the long shift. When the spike appeared on her screen, she thought it was interference. But then the pattern repeated, sharp, deliberate, intelligent. Her hands froze for a second, then moved quickly over the controls. She isolated the source and amplified it. The sound that filled her headset was not random static. It was a structured rhythm, layered with strange tones, pulsing like a heartbeat in distress. "Control, I have something," she whispered, though the room was empty except for her. Her voice trembled, but excitement burned beneath her nerves. "This isn't noise. It's a signal. An SOS." Within hours, the entire Lunar Monitoring Division was alive with energy. Scientists, linguists, and military officers crowded into the control center. The signal repeated endlessly, as if the sender feared silence would mean death. The first breakthrough came when they discovered a repeating symbol buried in the data. It was not human, but it was unmistakable. The universal rhythm of distress, a call older than any civilization, an SOS. The more they decoded, the clearer the message became. The aliens were not just asking for help, they were screaming for it. Their message spoke of an enemy that moved like fire across star systems, burning through fleets, breaking defenses, leaving ruins where once there were thriving worlds, and there was urgency. The words, translated only partially, spoke of last stands, failing shields, and the collapse of alliances. The message was not calm negotiation. It was the voice of someone clinging to survival. On Earth, the discovery exploded across governments and agencies. In Washington, generals and presidents sat around long tables, listening as scientists explained that this was not a natural signal. It was intelligent, it was clear, and it was meant for someone else. "Are we sure this wasn't directed at us?" asked one senator. "No," replied Dr. Alvarez, the lead scientist from the monitoring station. His voice was calm but heavy. "This signal was never meant for Earth. The code structure implies knowledge of mathematics and physics beyond our own. It was designed for those who already share certain standards. Whoever sent this, they expected advanced allies. We were not the intended receivers. And yet," said a general leaning forward, "we are the ones who got it." The room fell silent. That truth carried weight. Humanity was not part of any galactic community. They had dreamed of alien contact, but they had never been invited. If such a community existed, Earth had been ignored. The galaxy had looked at them from afar and chosen silence. And yet now, through chance or fate, the plea for help had landed in their hands. Public knowledge of the signal spread slowly at first. Officials tried to keep it secret, but rumors leaked. Soon news outlets whispered about strange transmissions from space, about scientists working day and night in hidden labs. Online forums filled with speculation. When the government finally admitted the truth, humanity stood at a crossroads. The signal was real. The senders were unknown. The danger they spoke of was immense. And now the question hung over Earth: what would humanity do? In a small apartment in London, a young engineer named David scrolled through the translation that had been released to the public. His mind was alive with questions. Who were these people? What kind of enemy could break whole civilizations? He thought of history, of times when desperate calls for aid had gone unanswered and what suffering had followed. Humanity knew too well the cost of silence. On the other side of the world, in Tokyo, a teacher named Hana looked at her students and wondered what kind of universe they were inheriting. The children were full of excitement, speaking about spaceships and alien friends, but beneath their words was fear. If the signal was true, the universe was not safe. And in the deserts of Arizona, retired Colonel James Wright sat alone on his porch, staring at the stars. He had fought in wars on Earth and thought he had seen enough of battle. But when he heard the translation, he felt a stirring in his chest. The call was not to him, not to humanity, but could they really ignore it? Back in the lunar station, Sarah Klein continued to monitor the repeating message. She had listened to it so many times that she almost felt she knew the sender. The voice, or what passed for a voice, was not human. It was layered, musical, strained with exhaustion, sometimes in the pauses between the words. She imagined she could hear sorrow as if entire worlds were fading behind it. She wondered if the sender was still alive, or if the signal was all that remained of them. Earth's leaders met again, this time in a global summit. Representatives from every nation argued fiercely. "Interference is too dangerous," said one. "We don't know these aliens. We don't know their enemies. Why should we risk ourselves?" "Because we cannot ignore suffering," countered another. "If their message reached us, perhaps it was meant to. Perhaps this is our chance to prove humanity belongs among the stars. Or our chance to bring destruction to our doorstep," warned a third. The debate stretched for days, but something had already begun among the people of Earth. Artists painted images of unknown galaxies. Children sent their own radio signals into the sky, trying to answer back. Volunteers signed up for missions that did not yet exist. The world felt a stirring it had not known in generations, the feeling of destiny. One evening, Sarah stood at the station window, looking out at the dark sea of stars. The signal still pulsed in the background, steady and unyielding. She thought of the millions, maybe billions of lives hidden in those words. She spoke softly, though no one could hear her but herself. "We got your message," she said. "We don't know if we can help, but we're listening." And somewhere, far across the void, the desperate message continued, never knowing that its accidental audience was a world of Deathworlders, humans who had survived their own brutal planet, who had learned to fight, to endure, and to rise. The galaxy had not called to them, but they had heard it anyway, and Earth was deciding how to answer. The message kept playing. Day after day, hour after hour, the alien distress signal echoed in the ears of scientists, soldiers, and politicians. It had become more than just data. It was a voice that refused to be ignored. In the halls of power, Earth was still divided. The great nations argued over what to do. Should they answer? Should they stay silent? Or should they prepare for the possibility that the enemy mentioned in the SOS might one day find Earth? The meeting of nations in Geneva, the United World Council gathered inside a circular chamber built for global emergencies. Flags from every nation hung high above, and in the center sat a single glowing display. The alien message, slowly rotating in 3 dimensions. President Eleanor Hayes of the North American Union leaned forward, her voice steady but sharp. "Colleagues, we must face the truth. The message is not random. These people are dying. Their allies did not hear them, but we did. To do nothing would be to stand by while civilizations burn." Opposite her, Chancellor Ingrid Voss of Europa shook her head. "President Hayes, you speak of compassion, but you forget risk. We are not part of their war. We know nothing of their politics. What if by answering we bring their enemy to our skies? Earth is still healing from its own conflicts. Can we afford a galactic one?" The arguments flared hotter. Some leaders spoke of fear, others of hope. The smaller nations, long ignored in global affairs, reminded everyone that humanity had once needed help too, and often received none. Then Admiral Chen of the Pacific Defense Fleet stood. His uniform carried the weight of decades in service. His words cut through the noise. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am a soldier. My job is not to start wars, but to prevent them. And I tell you this, if these invaders are as dangerous as the message suggests, they will not stop at one star system. One day they may find Earth. The question is not whether we fight. The question is whether we fight now alongside others or fight later. Alone." The chamber grew silent. For the first time, many began to see the signal not just as someone else's problem, but as humanity's warning. The public awakens outside the council chambers. The world was alive with debate. On the streets of New Delhi, posters showed alien cities under attack, painted by artists who had seen fragments of the decoded images. The caption beneath read, "Would we want to be ignored?" In Lagos, students marched with banners declaring, Humanity answers the call. They sang songs of solidarity, imagining friends among the stars. But in Moscow and Chicago, protests erupted as well. People feared that answering the SOS meant bringing unknown danger home. They argued Earth had no right to interfere in alien wars. News stations played the alien voice again and again. Each replay carried the same desperate rhythm. People could not understand the exact words, but they understood the feeling. It was the sound of survival slipping away. A soldier's memory. In a quiet room at the Defense Academy, retired Colonel James Wright watched the broadcasts. The old soldier had spent years in deserts and jungles, fighting wars he barely remembered the reasons for. Yet when he heard the alien distress call, he felt something stir in him. He remembered villages destroyed, families crying, the helplessness of those who had no power. Help, he muttered to himself. They're just asking for help. For him, the debate was over. He knew what had to be done. And he was not alone. Across the world, veterans, scientists, engineers, and dreamers all came to the same conclusion. If humanity could help, they must. The first plan back in Geneva, the Council voted. The result was not unanimous, but it was clear enough. Humanity would not ignore the signal. But how? Earth had fleets of ships, but they were built for exploration and defense, not interstellar war. Their technology was advanced compared to Earth's history, but compared to galactic civilizations, no one knew. Still, humanity had something unique, the will to survive. As a species from a death world, they had evolved through hardship. They had built machines to conquer oceans, skies, and even space itself. They had fought wars, faced plagues, and rebuilt after disasters. And now they would prepare again. A fleet was proposed, part exploration, part defense, part humanitarian. Some ships would carry weapons, others supplies. Engineers rushed to adapt engines for longer jumps, to design shields that could endure new kinds of fire. It would not be perfect. It would not be enough to defeat a galactic empire, but it would be something. Doubt among the stars unknown to Earth. Their decision was already being watched. Far beyond human reach, hidden satellites belonging to the Galactic Alliance picked up Earth's activity. The Alliance had long known about humanity but had chosen silence. Deathworlders were seen as too violent, too unpredictable. To the Alliance, Earth was a world better left alone. Now, however, the Alliance saw the Deathworlders preparing ships, decoding signals, and planning to move. Impossible, muttered one alien ambassador in his council chamber. His skin shimmered blue as his anger grew. The SOS was meant for us, not for them, others agreed. If the humans interfere, they may cause chaos. They do not understand galactic law. They do not understand restraint. Yet a few voices were quieter, thoughtful. But they do understand survival, one elder whispered. And perhaps that is exactly what is needed. The launch of Destiny on Earth preparations moved quickly. Factories that once built civilian craft now produced modular ships. Engineers worked without rest, sleeping on floors beside their projects. Pilots trained in simulators practicing maneuvers in asteroid fields and under hostile conditions. The fleet began to take shape. It was not large compared to the armadas spoken of in the alien message, but it was fierce. The lead ship was named Endurance. It carried not only weapons but also medical bays, translators, and entire sections filled with supplies. The name was chosen to remind everyone of humanity's greatest strength, persistence against all odds. As the day of departure drew near, the world held its breath. Cities stopped to watch live broadcasts. Families gathered around screens. Children held small flags bearing the emblem of the new fleet, a star wrapped by two hands. The farewell Sarah Klein, the officer who had first discovered the signal, stood on the bridge of Endurance. She wore her uniform neatly, though her hands trembled slightly as she touched the console. She had not expected her life to lead here, yet now she was part of history. Beside her stood Captain Marcus Hale, a seasoned explorer turned commander. His voice carried steady authority as he addressed the crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are not going to war today. We are going to answer a call. Out there are people who believed no one heard them. But we did. And because we did, we cannot remain silent. We will bring aid. We will bring strength. And if necessary, we will bring the fight. Humanity has always faced the impossible. This will be no different." Applause filled the bridge, Back on Earth, crowds gathered at spaceports watching the fleet rise into the sky. The engines roared like thunder, a sound that shook hearts with pride and fear alike. Parents held their children high to see. Old men and women wept as the ships ascended, knowing they might never return. The decision sealed as the fleet prepared for its first jump. Sarah listened once more to the alien distress call. It still played, unchanged, desperate. But now she felt something different in it. It was no longer just sorrow. Now it was a promise. She whispered, "We heard you. We're coming." And with a burst of light, the fleet vanished into the stars. The decision had been made. Humanity would not remain hidden on their death world. They would step into the galaxy, not as invaders, not as conquerors, but as responders to a call that was never meant for them. The galaxy had ignored Earth for centuries. But now the Deathworlders were moving, and nothing would ever be the same again. The first jump was unlike anything humanity had ever attempted. For a brief moment, the fleet was wrapped in silence. Space folded, stretched, and then snapped back into shape. Stars blurred, then sharpened again. When the human fleet reappeared, they were no longer near Earth. They had arrived in the middle of a war zone, the battlefield. The system they jumped into was broken and burning. Planets glowed faintly in the distance, their surfaces scarred by bombardments. Wreckage drifted across the void, hulks of destroyed ships, twisted metal spinning slowly like tombs in orbit. And ahead, the battle was still raging. A cluster of alien ships, battered and smoking, tried to hold a defensive line around a small moon. Their shields flickered weakly, barely holding against the storm of fire raining down on them. Their enemy, an armada of sleek dark warships, pressed forward with cruel precision. Even at a distance, the humans could see it was hopeless. The defenders were outnumbered. Their lines were breaking. The SOS had not been exaggeration. This was extinction in motion. The first shock on the bridge of the flagship Endurance, Captain Marcus Hale stood tall, his eyes locked on the tactical display. Around him, the crew was silent, stunned by what they saw. Lieutenant Sarah Klein whispered, "It's worse than the message said." Marcus nodded. He had seen war before, but never on this scale. Entire fleets were being crushed like toys. One of the officers asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "Captain, what do we do? Do we retreat?" Marcus's voice was firm. "No. We came here because they asked for help. If we turn back now, we are no better than the silence they feared. Ready the fleet. Signal our presence." The order carried weight. Humanity was about to announce itself to the galaxy, not with words but with action. The rescue begins. Human ships surged forward. Engines roared as the fleet cut through the debris field. Weapons powered up, shields flared bright, and every crew member felt the pulse of fear and determination in their chest. The alien defenders noticed first. Their communications channels, cracked and weak, filled with voices of shock. "It's not the Alliance," one alien officer cried. "Unknown fleet detected," another shouted. "Who are they? What are they doing here?" Then the humans opened fire. The first volley streaked across the void, missiles and railgun slugs ripping through the enemy's formation. The invaders staggered for a moment, surprised by the sudden interference. The defenders watched in disbelief as the newcomers cut into the battle with reckless speed. For the first time in hours, the enemy's advance slowed. The alien view aboard one of the surviving defender ships. Commander Renus of the Villari watched the newcomers with wide eyes. His crew stared at their screens in disbelief. "Who are they?" his second-in-command whispered. Renus had no answer. He had expected the Alliance. He had prayed for the mighty fleets of civilized powers to arrive. Instead, these strangers had appeared, small in number, crude in design, yet somehow throwing themselves into the storm without hesitation. "They're mad," one officer said. "Their maneuvers, they're too close to the enemy. They'll be destroyed." But the strangers were not destroyed. They darted between larger ships, striking at weak points using debris as cover. Their movements were unpredictable, dangerous and effective, Deathworlders. Though the Villari did not yet know the word, the human way of fighting on Endurance. Alarms blared as enemy fire grazed the shields. The crew worked with fierce focus. Enemy cruiser locked. "Fire all batteries. Brace for return fire." The ship rocked, but the humans pushed forward. Their tactics were unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. Where most species fought cautiously, keeping distance, the humans dove straight into danger. They attacked from angles considered suicidal. betting everything on speed, nerve, and improvisation. Captain Hale gave orders calmly but decisively. Target their command ship. Break their formation, the fleet responded. Coordinated strikes hit the enemy's lead vessel. Explosions lit up the void. The once unbroken wall of the invaders cracked. For the first time, the defenders cheered. The enemy's confusion, on the bridge of the enemy flagship, Admiral Valon snarled in disbelief. His kind, the Carthos, were conquerors who had swept through countless systems. They had seen every strategy, crushed every resistance. But this was different, these newcomers. What are they? One officer asked. They are fools, Valon growled, throwing themselves into fire as if they do not value life. But fools can be dangerous. Redirect forces. Crush them quickly. The Carthos fleet turned its guns on the humans holding the line. The battle intensified. Human ships shook under the barrage, but they refused to break. They weaved between wrecks, fired from impossible angles, and shielded the alien defenders with their own hulls. Sarah Klein felt her heart hammering as she monitored signals. Captain, their comms are opening. They're trying to talk to us. Patch them through, Marcus said. The alien voice crackled across the bridge, strained with disbelief. This is Commander Rhinus of the Valari. Identify yourselves. This is Captain Hale of the United Earth Fleet, Marcus replied. We received your SOS. We're here to help. Silence followed. Then Rhinus spoke again, almost whispering. You're not Alliance. You're outsiders. We're humans, Marcus said simply. And right now, that's enough. The turning point together, humans and Valari began to push back. With the newcomers covering their flanks, the defenders regrouped and struck harder than before. The enemy had expected an easy victory, but now they were facing resistance from two fronts. Confusion spread among their ranks. Ships broke formation. Then came the boldest move. Captain Hale ordered a direct strike on the enemy flagship. It was madness. The flagship was heavily armed, its shields far stronger than any single human ship could break. But Hale did not plan to fight it the way others would. He used deception. The Endurance drew the flagship's fire, taking heavy hits but staying just out of range of destruction. Meanwhile, smaller human frigates darted in from blind spots, launching missiles at weak points. Valari ships added their firepower, coordinated by human signals. Bit by bit, the giant cracked. Finally, a railgun slug pierced its reactor. The flagship erupted in a blinding explosion that shook the entire battlefield. The Carthos fleet faltered. Their command was gone. Their morale broke. And then, for the first time in the system, silence returned. Aftermath of fire. The defenders cheered across their channels. Cries of relief and victory filled the comms. For them, the impossible had happened. They had been saved not by the mighty Alliance, but by strangers from an unknown world. On Endurance, the crew was exhausted, their bodies trembling from adrenaline and fear. Sarah slumped against her console, whispering, "We did it. We actually did it." Marcus Hale looked at the stars ahead. He knew this was only the beginning. "We bought them time," he said softly. But the war isn't over. The first meeting later, the surviving Valari fleet formed a rendezvous with the humans. For the first time, human and alien ships faced each other not as enemies but as allies. On the comms, Commander Rhinus appeared, his form tall, scaled, with eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. His voice carried awe and caution. "You are not who we expected," he said. "Your ships are strange. Your tactics reckless. Yet without you we would be ash." Captain Hale inclined his head respectfully. "We may not be the ones you wanted, but we heard your call, and we will stand with you." Rhinus studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then perhaps there is hope after all. The galaxy notices far away. The Galactic Alliance received reports of the battle. Their spies confirmed it. The distress signal had been answered, but not by them. It was the humans. The council chambers erupted in chaos. Some ambassadors raged, furious that Deathworlders had interfered. Others whispered, unsettled by the fact that these unpredictable newcomers had achieved what entire fleets had failed to do. The galaxy's old powers had ignored the cry for help. The Deathworlders had answered. The fire still burns on the bridge of Endurance. Sarah sat quietly watching the stars. The adrenaline was fading, but the weight of what had happened was only growing heavier. "We showed them we can fight," she murmured. Marcus Hale stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the endless dark. "Yes, but now we've also shown the enemy who we are. And they will not forget. In the silence, the truth settled over them all. The humans had arrived. They had entered the galaxy in fire, not peace. And nothing would ever be the same. The battle was over, but the silence that followed was heavy. Wreckage floated through the void like drifting graves. Flames still burned in the husks of destroyed ships. And among the survivors, there was no cheering now. Only quiet, uncertain breathing. The humans had won a battle. But victory was not the same as trust. The first gathering in the orbit of the scarred moon, the remaining Valari ships docked alongside the human fleet. The moment was tense. Alien eyes studied the Deathworlders with suspicion, their scaled hands hovering close to weapons. On Endurance, Captain Marcus Hale prepared to meet Commander Renus face-to-face for the first time. Sarah Klein stood beside him, nervous but curious. They had fought for these people, saved them from destruction. Yet they did not know if they would be welcomed as friends or treated as dangerous intruders. The airlock hissed open. Renus stepped through, tall and imposing, his silver scales catching the light. Behind him walked several officers, their expressions unreadable. For a moment, no one spoke. Two civilizations that had never met before stood together in uneasy silence. Finally, Renus's voice broke the stillness. "You are not of the Alliance," he said slowly. "And yet you came, why?" Marcus answered without hesitation. "We heard your call. We couldn't ignore it." Renus's eyes narrowed. "You risked your lives, your fleet for strangers, why?" Sarah spoke softly, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Because if we were the ones calling, we would want someone to answer." The Valari exchanged glances. Their suspicion remained, but something in Sarah's tone gave them pause. The debate among allies later, aboard the Valari flagship, a council of survivors gathered. Their voices were sharp, their words filled with doubt. "These humans are reckless," one officer growled. "They fight like wild beasts without discipline." "They saved us," another reminded him. "Without them, we would be dead. But at what cost?" The first retorted, "They are Deathworlders. I have heard the stories. Creatures who thrive in danger, who cannot be trusted with power. If we allow them to fight with us, they may bring more chaos than the enemy itself." Commander Renus listened quietly. He understood their fear. The humans were strange, unpredictable. Yet he could not ignore the truth. When all seemed lost, they had stood in the fire and turned the tide. Finally, he spoke. "Perhaps they are dangerous, but so are the Carthos. If the humans choose to fight, perhaps danger is exactly what we need." The chamber fell into uneasy silence, suspicion and compassion. Meanwhile, on Endurance, the humans offered supplies to the Valari survivors. Medical teams crossed over, carrying crates of food, water, and medicine. At first, the Valari accepted the aid with hesitation. Their eyes watched every movement, expecting tricks. But as the hours passed, suspicion began to soften. A young Valari child, injured and trembling, was carried into the human medical bay. Dr. Elena Morales knelt beside the small figure, speaking in gentle tones, though the child did not understand her words. She cleaned the wounds, wrapped them carefully, and offered a piece of sweetbread from her own ration pack. The child blinked at her, then slowly took the bread. For the first time since the battle, he smiled faintly. Renus heard of this later and said nothing, but deep inside something shifted. These Deathworlders did not only fight with ferocity, they also showed compassion in ways the Alliance had long forgotten. The message spreads word of the battle traveled quickly. Refugees carried stories of the strange newcomers who fought with fire in their eyes and shielded the weak with their own hulls. Whispers spread across nearby systems. The humans had come. In the halls of the Galactic Alliance, the news caused uproar. "They interfere in matters beyond their right," one ambassador hissed. "They are unstable. If we allow this, soon they will demand seats in our council." But others, quieter, spoke differently. "They saved lives where we did nothing. Perhaps we should not judge so quickly." The Alliance had ignored the SOS. Humanity had not. And that truth was beginning to weigh heavily. The clash of culture days later, a joint strategy meeting was held between the humans and the Valari. Maps of star systems flickered on holographic displays. Enemy fleets were on the move again, preparing for another strike. The Valari officers presented their cautious plan. Retreat, regroup, and wait for reinforcements that might never arrive. Marcus Hale shook his head firmly. If you retreat, they will only gain ground. You'll be running forever. We must strike first, take them by surprise. One Valari slammed his fist on the table. Reckless madness. You would throw lives away. Marcus's eyes hardened. Sometimes risk is the only path to survival. We learned that on our world. You cannot win by hiding. The room fell into heated argument. The Valari feared the humans' boldness. The humans despised the Valari's hesitation. Finally, Renus raised his hand for silence. We will not survive without each other. If humans fight and Valari hold back, we will fail. But if we combine caution with boldness, perhaps we will stand. Slowly, both sides nodded. It was not trust yet, but it was the beginning of cooperation. Shared losses. That night, Sarah walked through the Valari refugee camps. She saw families huddled in makeshift shelters, soldiers wounded and silent, children clutching pieces of broken toys. One Valari elder approached her, his eyes weary. You are strange creatures, he said softly. You kill like storms, yet your healers work with such care. Which are you truly? Sarah looked at the refugees, then back at him. We are both, she admitted. Because our world forced us to be. The elder studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Perhaps that is why you may succeed where others have failed. The enemy regroups. While the humans and Valari debated and rebuilt, the Karthos did not remain idle. Across the void, their surviving commanders gathered under new leadership. Admiral Valen, scarred but alive, swore vengeance. He would not allow these newcomers to spread hope. Their reckless defiance had embarrassed him, and for that, he would make Earth itself burn. The Deathworlders think themselves strong, he told his captains, but they are fools who have never known true war. We will crush them, and the galaxy will learn what happens to those who resist. The Karthos began to prepare a massive strike, larger than anything the humans had yet faced. Trust tested back at the joint fleet, tension still ran high. Some Valari officers refused to work with humans, believing them too dangerous. Some human crew muttered that the aliens were cowards. But slowly, small acts began to build bridges. A Valari engineer watched in surprise as a human mechanic repaired one of their broken engines using nothing but scrap parts and clever improvisation. You fight your machines into working, the engineer said in awe. The human grinned. We call it fixing. Elsewhere, human soldiers trained beside Valari warriors. At first, their styles clashed. Humans were aggressive, Valari were defensive. But then they began to learn from each other, combining strengths. Trust did not come easily. But it came. The moment of choice one evening, Rhinus stood with Marcus on the viewing deck of Endurance. The stars stretched endlessly before them. You do not understand what you have done, Rhinus said quietly. By fighting here, you have drawn the eyes of the galaxy. The Alliance will not welcome you. The Karthos will hunt you. You may have doomed your world. Marcus did not look away, or saved it. If the enemy comes, at least Earth will not face them alone. Rhinus studied him for a long time. Then for the first time he extended his hand, a Valari gesture of alliance. Then let us stand together. Reluctantly, perhaps. But together, Marcus clasped it firmly. The alliance forged, the reluctant alliance was sealed. Humans and Valari would fight as one. News of their cooperation spread faster than expected. Refugees and other systems whispered of the Deathworlders who brought hope. Some species, long ignored by the alliance, began to wonder if perhaps these strange newcomers might succeed where the great powers had failed. The galaxy was shifting. Old walls of distrust were cracking, and at the center of it stood humanity, uninvited, unexpected but impossible to ignore. The calm before the storm and Endurance, Sarah listened once more to the alien SOS that had started it all. It still repeated the same desperate rhythm, but now when she heard it, she no longer felt only sorrow. She felt determination. We answered, she whispered. And now, we won't stop. The fleet prepared for the next battle. Humans and Valari, bound not by trust but by necessity, stood side by side. The war was far from over, but something had changed forever. The galaxy had hoped for old allies. Instead, it had Deathworlders, and Deathworlders did not back down. The stars were not silent anymore. Every channel in the sector carried reports of a storm coming. The Karthos were mobilizing their largest fleet yet. Thousands of ships, weapons charged, preparing to crush both Valari survivors and the humans who had dared to interfere. The SOS that once cried for help had reached its final echo. This time there would be no chance to retreat. The galaxy watched, the War Council on. The flagship Endurance Captain Marcus Hale stood at the center of a crowded command chamber. Beside him were Commander Rhinus of the Volari, Sarah Klein with her endless data readouts, and officers from both species. A holographic display shimmered above the table, showing the enemy armada moving like a tide of steel and fire. Rhinus's voice was heavy. If we face them in open battle, we are outnumbered 5-1. One Volari officer muttered, "Then we cannot win." Marcus looked around the room, his jaw set. Numbers aren't everything. Humanity has survived worse with less. You built walls to keep danger out. We climbed walls until they broke. If you want to live, we fight differently. He pointed at the hologram. We don't meet them head on. We harass them, bleed them, make every ship pay. And when their formation breaks, we strike at the heart. The Volari exchanged uneasy glances. To them, battle was about careful control, defense, and retreat. This idea of tearing at the enemy from the shadows was strange. Rhinus studied Marcus carefully. This plan, it is madness, but perhaps madness is what they will not expect. The decision was made. Preparing for the storm. The joint fleet moved to a barren system on the edge of enemy space. Its planets were dead, its moons hollow, but its asteroid fields and debris offered cover. Human engineers worked side by side with Volari technicians, rigging asteroids with mines and hidden cannons. Soldiers prepared ambush points. Pilots studied attack routes that twisted through rock and shadow. In the hangars, Sarah coordinated information between crews. She had grown tired, but determination burned in her eyes. "We'll never match them in strength," she told Rhinus. "But if we can make them doubt themselves even for a moment, we win." Rhinus replied quietly, "You humans, you fight not only with weapons, but with fear itself." Marcus, inspecting the defenses, gave a sharp grin. "Fear is useful, but hope is stronger. And right now, hope is all we have." The enemy arrives. The Karthos fleet entered the system like a dark wave. Thousands of ships blotted out the stars, their engines burning like fire. Admiral Valon sat on his throne of steel, certain of victory. "End this rebellion," he commanded. "Erase the Deathworlders from existence." The first volleys lit the void. Enemy weapons struck empty asteroids, then detonated mines hidden within them. Explosions ripped across their flanks. From the shadows, human fighters darted like wasps, striking and vanishing. Volari warships held defensive lines, covering escape routes and drawing enemy fire. Together, the two forces moved with an odd rhythm. Human chaos, Volari discipline, blending into something new. The heat of battle, on the bridge of endurance, alarms blared. Hull plating trembled under impacts. Marcus barked orders. "Keep pressure on their flanks." "Push them into the field," Sarah shouted. "They're trying to break through our left line." Rhinus's voice cut through. "Volari ships, shield the gap. Humans, strike behind them." And for the first time, they moved not as two fleets, but as one. Volari cruisers raised shimmering shields holding the line. Human destroyers darted around them, unleashing torrents of fire into exposed engines. Enemy ships burned and spun into the void. Still, the Karthos pressed forward. Their numbers seemed endless. Every victory cost lives. Wreckage of human and Volari ships drifted together, silent testimonies of sacrifice. A turning point hours into the battle, the enemy flagship loomed in the center of the chaos. Its size dwarfed anything the humans had ever seen, bristling with weapons. Marcus's eyes fixed on it. "That's the head of the beast. Cut it off and the rest may fall apart." But the path was guarded by layers of Karthos ships. To reach it would mean plunging into the teeth of the enemy. Sarah whispered, "It's impossible." Marcus gave her a steady look. "Everything we've done was impossible. That never stopped us before." He opened the fleet-wide channel. "This is Captain Hale. We came here because no one else would. We fight because we refuse to let darkness spread. We may not see Earth again. But if we fall here, let it be remembered. Humanity answered the call. Now forward!" The humans roared their answer. Even the Volari, moved by his words, joined the cry. The charge. The joint fleet surged toward the enemy flagship. Volari ships formed shields around the human vanguard, absorbing brutal fire. Human ships darted ahead, striking weak points, tearing holes through the defensive line. Inside the flagship, Admiral Valen sneered. Fools. They rushed to their deaths. But then the chaos began to spread. Human fighters smashed into supply ships. Valari bombardments collapsed enemy formations. For the first time, the Karthos line wavered. Marcus gave the order. All ships target the flagship. The sacrifice as the flagship's cannons turned on endurance, destruction rained down. The ship shuddered, alarms blaring. Entire sections went dark. Sarah gripped her console, fear in her chest. We can't take much more. Then a voice crackled over comms, a Valari captain. Human commander, take the shot. We will hold them. Before Marcus could reply, the Valari ship surged ahead, shielding endurance with its own body. Enemy fire tore it apart, but in its final act it opened a clear path. Rhaenys' face was grim, but his voice was firm. Do not waste their gift, Marcus nodded. Helm, straight at their heart. The final strike endurance and the remaining ships charged. Weapons fired at full power, tearing into the enemy flagship's hull. Fighters swarmed, planting explosives along its flanks. Inside, Sarah's calculations guided the attacks, finding weak points in its defenses. Now hit the core! A massive blast ripped through the flagship. Fire consumed its structure. The giant ship groaned as if alive, then tore itself apart in a burst of light. Across the battlefield, the Karthos froze. Their command was gone. Panic spread like fire. Ships began to scatter. The tide turned. The joint fleet pressed the advantage. Valari precision, human fury. They struck as one. The enemy, once unstoppable, broke and fled. The aftermath silence returned to the void. Wreckage drifted everywhere, but this time victory shone brighter than loss. On Endurance, the crew sat in exhausted silence. Some wept quietly. Others simply stared at the stars. Sarah whispered, "We did it." Marcus leaned back, weary but proud. No, we all did. He looked at Rhaenys. Humans, Valari. Together. Rhaenys inclined his head. Perhaps we were wrong about you. Perhaps Deathworlders are not only destroyers, but also defenders. The message renewed days later. A transmission was sent across the sector. Not an SOS this time, but a declaration. This is Captain Marcus Hale of Earth. We are human. We heard your call and we answered. We are not part of your alliances, but we will not stand by while tyrants burn your worlds. If you need us, call. And no, we will come. The message spread far. Across forgotten colonies, oppressed peoples, and ignored outposts, hope sparked again. The galaxy had allies it never expected. The quiet reflection. That night, Sarah stood alone in the observation deck, staring at the stars. The SOS signal that had begun their journey still echoed faintly, now silent on most channels. She remembered the first time she heard it, just a desperate cry in the dark. Now that cry had become a promise. They wanted allies, she whispered. Instead, they got us, and for the first time, she believed that was enough. Epilogue. The Deathworlder answer in the records of the Valari. This battle would be remembered not as the day they were saved, but as the day they fought alongside a new force. A people from a dangerous world, uninvited, unwanted, yet unstoppable. The galaxy had sent out a call for help. The old powers had ignored it. But the Deathworlders had answered, and the galaxy would never be the same.